What's going on, Freedom Fit family? It's Shad here with another video. Go ahead and like the video and subscribe to the channel if you find that this message is edifying for you. And today I want to talk about how important it is for us to be sober-minded. And there's a lot of levels of being sober-minded. But specifically, what I'm talking about is really being aware of the world that you live in, right? Being aware of what's going on around you. And furthermore, what are you doing in your everyday life? How are you living your life, and why are you living your life that way? The things that we have agreed with as normal in our lives are things that were taught to us. Things that have become culture, and because we've done them since birth, we assume that these things are regular and moral. But the truth is that most of what we have been taught is immoral if we're going by the understanding of what the Most High God of the Bible deemed as right and wrong. And I believe that's one of the biggest hangups for somebody who wants to live biblical, who wants to get closer to God. The fact that you have to unlearn everything that you took in for 20 years, 40 years, 60 years, however old you may be, and bring every thought now to the obedience of Christ, who is the Word of God. Therefore, bring every thought to the obedience of the Bible. And what's also important to know is that God hates idolatry. That might be the thing that he hates most. And no matter what country you live in, laws have been changed. What's taught as right and wrong has been changed over time. Therefore, by nature, we're taught to do wicked things and accept them as normal. Furthermore, God gave the first law. If you live in America, we have a constitution, right? So to make it simple, the first constitution, the first handbook, the first manual to regulate society was God's law, the Tanakh. Now, over time, because the world has been controlled by different nations, literally the whole world, not just a couple countries. And in that process, laws have been changed, times have been changed. The concept of what's right and wrong as far as we can perceive has been changed. And I say we can perceive because the overall truth never changed. That's why when we live in a way that's out of alignment with the original instruction, we're going to pay. Historically, Israel, who is God's chosen people, God would have them literally be separate from other nations. So, for example, I live in the state of Florida. Let's say the whole state of Florida was the land of Israel. That was their country. They would live there and be separate from every other nation who historically served other gods. So those other nations may live in Georgia, New York, Wyoming, wherever they live, but to serve the Most High God to the most efficient and thorough way possible, God knew they had to be separate. That's why he even had Moses tell Pharaoh, let my people go and let them go into the wilderness to serve me. Because you and I can't serve the Most High God as thoroughly as we would like by being in a nation that is rooted in wickedness, right? Now, of course, God has mercy. And of course, God knows that, well, I'll say this, God has mercy, and it is our job to work out our own salvation with fear and trembling, to be as thorough as possible on your walk, not using the land you live in as an excuse, but just the fact that there's going to be things that are a part of that society that defile you in a way. I'll give a simple example. When you look at clean foods versus unclean foods, right? So I could eat a clean food, but I don't know who cooked that food. Well, let me say this. Even if I cooked the food, before it came to my plate, before it came into the grocery store that I bought it from, Do I know verbatim what happened to that piece of meat, for example? I can put trust and hope in it, and that's why we bless our food before we eat it. But essentially, I don't know. But I do know that America is pretty much modern day Babylon, so they're going to worry about business, right? They're going to worry about just being the most powerful nation, right? And they're worried about manufacturing and again, like I said, making money. So I could, in my best intention, be eating a biblically clean food, but it could have been something, it could have been defiled before it came to me. That's just an example. I mean, there's so many examples I could go into. So what I'm saying is not that we have the intention to go ahead and live against the Most High God because we're in a wicked nation. But what I'm saying is we can do it the most thoroughly when we are separate from other nations that would try to throw little things into our way of life to deter us from serving the Most High God as perfectly as possible. But I digress. So essentially, though, all the things that we were taught culturally, the laws that we follow and all those things are not of the Bible. They may have taken a couple pieces of things from the Bible, but essentially what we've been taught is normal is not normal. So, like I was saying, the world has been ruled by many different nations before you and I were alive. You have the Babylonian Empire. You have, after that, the Persian Empire. After that, you have the Greek Empire. And after that, you have the Roman Empire. And then after that, Yeshua's kingdom will reign forever, which we're in the process of that being set up for Yeshua to come back. Now, there's a lot of things that happen in that lead up, but we're in that time frame somewhere. So because those nations ruled over us, ruled over the whole world, and they weren't kings that were of the Most High God, though God used them for their purpose, for his purpose, the residue from that rulership is what's left over, or what we experience today. And you have to understand that almost every sin is rooted in worshiping other deities, right? If you look at, I'm gonna give you an example too, and I'll tie it all together. If you look at the First Amendment, if you live in America, it pretty much says that the nation of America is not obligated to do anything under regulation of a particular God. And furthermore, every person is free to worship whatever God that they want. So then how so can they say it's one nation under God? What do they mean by that? What they really mean is one nation under God's, plural. But what's God's first law, at least in the Ten Commandments? You shall have no other God before me. Make no graven images, don't bow down to any of them. But how is it that in the land that I live in, at least, that the First Amendment says, serve any God you want, you're free to do so. But then they tell you one nation under God. That's a contradiction in itself. And that's also why, for example, as we grew up, we were programmed to think that God could just be a concept of a higher power. Even when you look at some of the early scientists, those who are considered the fathers of modern day science, right? Like Isaac Newton and a few other of them. They were considered deitists, which means they through their scientific calculation would have to concede that there is some form of higher power that some may call God, some may call it something else. But we have to concede it's a higher power, but they wouldn't believe in the specific biblical God. They didn't make a claim to that. They also doubted or just completely rejected that man and God can have a personal relationship, which is another attack on your faith, having you second guess what's been revealed to you, having you second guess the voice of God speaking to you, which doesn't always have to be audible. He can put his word in you and pull you and lead you in a certain direction and be talking to you like that and give you confirmation in your life to know it's him. But regardless, our ways of thinking, right? The way that we live is all influenced by the nation that we're under, and this is nothing new. And Israel historically would be put under bondage to the nations in whose God that they served. So if you like serving Moloch and Baal and all these people, I'm going to have the people of those deities rule over you. And some people will say, slavery, man, that's not of God. God doesn't want that. Yeah, that was the Old Testament, which I think even the term Old Testament is very subtle and very intentional. It's intentionally used in translations because old makes you think done away. Old makes you think not useful anymore. But there's nothing old about the Tanakh, which is the instruction of God's people, the original law as to how we should conduct ourselves, down to how we should operate with one another, the holy days we should honor, right? As well as just how to orient your life altogether. But regardless, the things that we've learned, the things that we've taken as normal, were all taught by another nation. And when you look at even slavery, who's to say we're not in a form of slavery right now? You could look at Pharaoh when Jehoiakim was king in the book of 2 Kings. And he put a tax on Jehoiakim and said his people would have to pay him X amount of money on a regular basis, right? When you look at Daniel, in the book of Daniel, when he was in Babylonian captivity, the king of Babylon took the wisest people in chapter 1. He took the wisest people of Israel and he made them the teachers to teach the Chaldeans language and science and all the things that they believed in. He took gifts of God and used it for his own agenda. In this nation, our gifts are used to serve the system a lot of the time. Even the foods that they ate, what you have to understand is that that's a lie if someone tells you that you're okay to eat anything that you want to eat. People like to use, Christ said, it's not what goes in, it's what goes out that defiles the man. He's talking about, he was specifically referring to when the Pharisees tried to challenge him about his disciples not washing his hands. He's not saying you can just, nothing that goes into you will defile you. Because if you really believe that, go ahead and drink some bleach and we'll see how that plays out for you. So we got to understand the scripture in context, right? Certain things weren't even seen as food. You see it as food now. Again, why? Because since a child, you were eating bacon and pork and shellfish and all these things. And I'm saying this with empathy because crab used to be my favorite food. I could knock down some bacon, but once the Most High God tells me that's not right, I'm not going to do it. There's even verses in the book of 1 Maccabees where you see that the Greeks sacrificed unclean foods to their deities. See, the thing that Satan likes to do, which is who these deities and idols are under, is he likes to pervert the things of God. And I'll close with this as a last point. I don't understand how churches in modern day just literally have holiday celebrations in their church. We have to understand that God gave us holy days for a reason. If you want to revere, worship, and honor him, then you go according to his holy days. You do the things that he told you would revere, honor, and worship him. Because historically, the children of Israel would revere other deities in the house of the Lord. They made shrines and graven images and all these different things in the house of the Lord. They sacrificed animals, and maybe even people. Actually, they did do a lot of sacrifice under Manasseh in the book of 2 Kings. They did this stuff in the house of the Lord. So what is different than someone celebrating Christmas, Halloween, Thanksgiving, any of those holidays in the house of the Lord in modern day? There is no difference. But again, that residue of these other nations is still on you if you're doing that. The belief that it's okay because you've been doing it since a child is still on you. And that's okay. It's time to get it off, though. It's not okay that you're doing it. It's okay that that might be where you're at if you're intending to change. If you're going to live your life for the Most High God, because this stuff is real. Like, people think that this is just, oh, that's something so small. Like, okay, who cares? But no, it's a real thing. Look at it like this. When you realize what God says to do on his holy days, he says to do no work, have a holy convocation, and make a feast for him, right? What do they do on all these holidays? They get off from work, so no one's working. They all get together, your uncle, cousin, whoever, holy convocation, and they make feasts. But their feasts are foods sacrificed to idols because they're doing it in the name of the idol who that holiday is celebrated after. And if you don't believe me, just do your research as to what the origin is of a lot of these holidays, right? And furthermore, God said he will bless you for honoring his holy days. So what do you gain from a holiday? It comes and it goes. It's one day here and gone. So I strongly advise to stop celebrating those. Why? Because it's idolatry. Because if you look at, again, what took place in the Babylonian Empire, the Greek Empire, even in the northern tribes of Israel, or with the northern tribes of Israel under Jeroboam, this is where these holidays and the concept of a holiday, just making up a day of celebration for a wicked deity, came from. They took it from God. So you can't remix the things of God and say, I'm honoring God by doing it. It doesn't work like that. He's a jealous God. He wants your reverence. He wants your exclusive worship and honor. And if you can find it in you to start reforming the way that you look at things, reforming the way that you think about things, reforming your decisions in your everyday life, and align them with the Most High God, he will bless you for that. And if you're doing things that are contrary to his law, and it's of a law that is man-made, there is judgment for that. Just like Israel was judged, as I explained, historically, for serving wicked deities. We go through consequences in our personal life, but if we don't know this, then we may not know to connect the two. And it's like, I'm going through all these things because I have idolatrous ways, right? Even Paul says to flee idolatry. So I hope this message edified you. If it did, go ahead and like the video, subscribe to the channel, and share it with someone else. Check the links below. Any verses that are pertinent to this discussion, I'll put them in the description. And I thank you all for watching. Talk to y'all next time. Freedom and truth.
They calling me a villain cause I'm hurting all they feelings. Get mad at me instead of looking how they living. Evaluate my life and you could really see the difference. Walk it how I talk it like a military drilling. If you go to church, they may tell you things that feel good. Why it don't work when you apply it to your livelihood? Erase all the wicked things, apply only what is good. Then the poor in spirit feel the presence of the fatherhood.